Good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us today. I'm Carolyn Laffin-Miller. I run our executive briefing program here at Avaya. I'm joining you from our New York Executive Briefing Center and Customer Experience Center. I'm joined with Sarah Reitzma from Waterfield. Sarah, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Reitzma, and I am the Director of Applied AI Design Services at Waterfield, where I lead teams designing and optimizing AI-driven voice and self-service solutions, specifically a lot for healthcare contact centers, really focusing on improving patient access, efficiency, and of course, experience.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And we've got a really fun session planned for you this afternoon and this next hour. Sarah and I are going to be talking about what we've done working with other healthcare customers and providers like yourselves, and insurance providers like yourselves. And before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping items. So the session's being recorded, and we'll send you the recording link along with any resources that we mentioned today. And we also have Jay Zucchetto joining us. So Jay is going to be manning our Q&A and joining us for questions. So Jay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Jay Zucchetto. I'm a channel customer engineer. I have over 13 years experience, well, more than that, but specifically working in healthcare, and I'm a member of the special interest group for IAUG for healthcare as well. So excited. I think this is fantastic content, and I think you guys will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and note, so IAUG is our international Avaya users group. So if anyone's joined that is not part of that team, you're welcome to go on to IAUG.org. They've got a lot of great resources. The healthcare team is also quite active as well. So so to go ahead and lead in. So Sarah, when you think about healthcare trends today, um, there's so much that we can do in terms of technology and capabilities. We've been talking about omni-channel for years and different scenarios for years, but patients, like the end customers, or even right doctors, et cetera, they can still feel like they have to scale brick walls sometimes, right? We all see this and feel this ourselves when we're the patient, and you get to a care team member and they can handle you so beautifully, but sometimes the challenge is how to get there from start to finish. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen working with our healthcare customers and your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, the reality is most of us are also patients, or if not all of us. And we've probably all felt this personally. So I know that, even as a patient, you'll resonate with some of this stuff. But things that customers often tell me or patients often tell us is there's long wait times. There's long holds, especially that Monday morning after the weekend, right? I might need to be transferred around to a bunch of different places because I don't know at the beginning what department I need. I just know that I'm sick. I have an issue. There's a lot of old menu-driven systems that assume some sort of industry knowledge about healthcare, using terminology that patients don't typically understand. There's also that annoyance of repeating the same story over and over again. So maybe I said something to an automated system, then I talk to a human, but that's not the right human. So my call has to be sent to the next human. And of course, I've now, no context has passed, and I've now repeated my story to three different systems or humans. So I think that, that's a huge thing that patients feel. Those are all sorts of things that are very real. I think the other thing is that patients don't think in terms of departments. They don't think in terms of benefit structures that insurance companies have, or clinical terminology, right? They think in problems of what they're trying to solve. So people saying like, hey, I need a pre-op physical. I have a mole on my arm I'm worried about, or I want to check the status of a referral. Is this covered? How much will I have to pay? Those are all questions that don't have really a lot of industry-specific lingo, but they're said in the words that make sense to the patient. And what's not happening in a lot of these systems is we're not allowing people to speak in their own voice, and we're not allowing to use the terms that they are comfortable with. And so they start, even at that first initial call, they start kind of frustrated because they might not choose the right option and get to the right place.
Well, and then even worse, they can decide I can't deal with this frustration right now, and they might be thinking, I don't think I can make that appointment on Thursday.
Mhm.
And they're trying to hedge and think of what else, can I look for a different time? And then the very negative result can be they may be canceling at the last minute. So you end up with that revenue leakage. So if
Absolutely.
you're not handling them well up front, we can end up with that with very real financial frustration down the line.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you talked about patients, but what about when physicians um, are really that category, reaching on it, or the insurance company, right? The providers, others.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of audiences that might be a little bit more forgotten, although not always. Obviously, we want to make it as easy as possible for patients, but typically, healthcare, within the healthcare industry, we're dealing with insurance complexity. And we're dealing with providers or provider billing offices. And so, things that I've seen here, um, using terminology like eligibility, deductible, out of pocket, accumulators. If I am a typical consumer and I don't know what those mean, but yet I need to talk to you about those things, like how much is this going to cost? That's what I'm thinking. Or is this
Yes.
service covered? Um, how much will I owe? Do I have any physical therapy visits left? I'm not saying any of those words, if you heard it, that I just talked about. I'm not saying eligibility. I'm not saying deductible, out of pocket, all of those different things. I'm really asking again, it really boils down to using my voice. And so when that insurance complexity, like how am I actually going to pay for this? There's one thing to say I need to get a mole checked out of my arm, but then of course that often leads to how much is that going to cost? So I think insurance lingo is certainly something in this space, and then with providers and provider billing offices, often large scale providers have billing offices that are making a lot of calls in and checking the status of a claim. They're checking to see if a prior auth was done. They're checking to see if they were paid. Was a claim paid, and what was the check number, and when was it sent, or was it sent electronic funds transfer? And the great part about these is these inquiries are really repetitive and routine, and these people do understand the lingo. And so providers and their offices are often a group that's really ripe for automation, but they're often overlooked because we do try to, service the members typically first, but they're also a very large calling population for most insurance companies and most healthcare organizations.
So you've talked a good amount so far around some of the trends and what we're seeing in terms of patient demand and some of the challenges. Where do you think the biggest gaps lie, and what do you think leaders may be overlooking?
Yeah, so I think the reality is kind of behind the scenes, right? And that's that a lot of companies have fragmented systems. So it's hard to get data. Typically, there's an EHR, there's claims, there's billing, there might be a separate scheduling system. And these have typically been in healthcare organizations, sort of owned by a department. And so, oh, that department is responsible for this, or, that's our billing department. They don't do anything with appointments, and it's all very fragmented. And it really needs to be more of an end-to-end experience. We need to remove the complexity of that departmental ownership. Your patient doesn't care how you're structured. Even though we need to keep that in mind when routing them, we really need to remove that complexity. There's a lot of fear rooted, especially with healthcare organizations, but really any organization, in sort of some of the past IVR failures, automation failures, or routing failures, like it didn't work out, people complained, those sorts of things. And so I think this can feel actually really hard to fix.
So where do you think AI will have the biggest impact and effect?
Yeah, so I like to think like if we had unlimited resources and no barriers, if we could design something from scratch today, right? What would it look like? We're not constrained by legacy systems. We have technology that can go out and get the data that we need. We're not constrained by fear or change or old assumptions. And I think AI for your organization can really do things like reach across those departments. So making sure that things that are happening within your patient access or scheduling department, right, are aligned with what's happening in clinical support. You may have somebody call in that uh, has just been discharged from the hospital a day ago, and now they're calling in. Like it's pretty important for you to know that they were just discharged from the hospital, and if they're calling in, they likely need the support of the department that they were working with. Billing, financial counseling, insurance and benefits, all the back office stuff. AI can actually like reach across all of those things and sort of pull it together. It can pull summaries. It can do things like help out patients, but it can also help your employees, so the people taking the phone calls, right? Giving them access to more information, helping pull up what were those discharge notes. Oh, they have a question about one of the meds they were discharged with, and really taking that to the next level and empowering the person taking that call, the human taking that call, to know a lot about that patient and really personalize that experience.
So
I,
when health systems are looking at this, I think that it can feel like everyone has a grasp on some of the challenges, right? They see it day in and day out, and it can feel like it's really hard to fix,
yeah.
right? It can feel like there's so many fragmented areas. How do we help take that to the next level?
Yeah, and I think when we look at implementing AI and how can it fix things, if it's implemented correctly, it should feel invisible. Like that's the number one thing. It should really remove that effort of the patient. It should reduce burden for your staff. It shouldn't feel like technology. It should just feel like it's easier for me to do my job if I'm an employee with you. It's easier for me to interact with your organization if it's deployed correctly. Um, I think in practice, there are sort of six things that I think about. And really good AI, it's safe and humble. It knows when it shouldn't pretend to know things, and it knows when it needs to ask a clarifying question. And so what does that really look like in practice? And I think first of all, it starts with the customer's language. So patients shouldn't need to use jargon, right? We already talked about this. So they
Yes.
want to say things like, is this covered? What will I pay? Can you help me understand my bill? Am I able to see the cardiologist now? I have a question about my medication. We really have to keep it within their customer language. Like that's the overarching principle of really any well-handled contact center. Um, it handles the happy path, which is great. And this is what old IVRs did, but it clarifies the messy ones. So I need to schedule an appointment. That could be a very easy call. It says, oh, do you want next available? But somebody also might come in and say, I need to schedule something. I don't really know exactly what type of an appointment, right? And so they didn't start out by clarifying a lot of information. And so a really good AI experience allows the system to meet patients where they are. Happy path, great, but it can also clarify the messy ones. It doesn't trap people. So this is, important. AI
Yeah.
never blocks the human option. We still need to have that. And I think most people within the healthcare space would agree. It can help customers self-serve if it's appropriate for them to self-serve. If I have an easy appointment to set up, if I'm canceling an appointment, but if it can't, it can hand off really gracefully when it can't help them, and it can pass all of that context. It improves the staff experience, right? So I talked a little bit about this. It doesn't just deflect calls. Things like agent assist and summary and next best action really help somebody handle a call really efficiently. It reduces burnout after call work. It helps with consistency because everyone is sort of looking at the same knowledge base or getting that next best action from the same tool. It has guardrails and measurement. So with AI, it's really important to know what information can I give a patient? What should I not give a patient? Make sure those guardrails in place. Did I misunderstand anything? And retraining the AI to understand it next time. And then also really looking at where people dropping out, what's trending, and making sure that we're continuously having it learn and tune so that it gets better and better over time. And I think kind of the last thing in practice is it's designed for trust. So, especially within healthcare and insurance, accuracy is super important, right? There's not an error margin there. It's important that it's super accurate. If you need to know how much meds to take, we have to tell you exactly how much meds to take, or there could be a safety issue. Privacy is also really important. Of course, there are HIPAA regulations and those sorts of things, but making sure that identity verification happens in a HIPAA compliant way.
And in this kind of dream blueprint, um, where do you advise that people start? If they have zero barriers to really think about how they apply this organizationally and supporting their patients. What are some of your thoughts around what great can actually look like?
Yeah, I think of kind of, old school IVR, if you will. And I think one of the things is AI is not the same as IVR. So IVR forces people to sort of adapt to the system, and AI actually adapts to the person calling. And that's a really, really important distinction. So if I was starting a journey down this path with my contact center from scratch, I think it would be really important to understand that AI is not IVR. It's not a decision tree. It doesn't expect the customer to pick the right menu option, to use the right words. It can dig deeper. It can ask more follow-up questions. It's not static, right? And so I think when you're looking at what's the best way to go about this, one of the things that I really like to do is I like to take a look at conversations. And you, as an organization, if you have any sort of tool to capture recordings, quality monitoring, any of that, have a lot of conversations available to you. There are, and Waterfield is doing this, there are trends that we can pull out of those conversations. So we can tell you, these are the top 5 calls that you get. Start here, do this now. This is a journey. You're not going to think of it as like a flowing river, right? You're not probably going to just, if it's really fast, you're not going to just jump in. You're probably going to put your toe in and see how deep it is and do those things. So I really encourage looking at the conversations you have today and figuring out how AI can really work to do the best things on those conversations. And then once you've sort of added those and are dealing with those in a really practical way, then you can go back and look at more conversations and you can and kind of keep that cycle going. So again, use the data that you have about uh, who your customers are, who your patients are, what your organization takes most often, and really use that as your starting point to jump into this next gen AI.
And we've also found that once you start looking at areas more in depth around those voice interactions, so for example, transcription and much more detail around those interactions, you can start to uncover where you might have some operational constraints or operational challenges. That you think
Absolutely.
something is really clear and evident on the patient portal and that it should be easy. But it turns out that people are asking the same questions
Yeah.
over and over and over again, or they've tried to do something, and that agent or care team member will say, "No, no, no, I understand, honey. Don't worry. I've got this for you. Yes, this does happen." So these can be things that we think are structured well, but there's use cases that go outside those boundaries. And those are the people who continually have to call or continually have to ask for more help. Or you're wondering why you don't have the uptake that you were expecting in some of these
Yeah.
more digital automated scenarios. And it's because um, people are finding challenges. Or maybe you've resolved those, but they're saying, I tried that 2 years ago. I'm I'm not I'm not doing it again. So the more that we can kind of care for those use cases, the better.
Absolutely. And I think that's about discovering those trends. Most of the healthcare organizations that I meet with after we've done some sort of analysis, and sometimes we'll do 5,000 calls, sometimes we'll do 20,000, it kind of depends. Most of the things that we find, a lot of them, the organization is very surprised about. They didn't know it was happening. We didn't know people are asking that question. We didn't
Yeah.
know people are going down that path. We didn't know people are confused about how to send in a payment, right? So it's really eye-opening to use the data that you have already in your organization to start to create your roadmap. And then use AI technology to enable that roadmap.
So so Sarah, as we start to get into some examples of how we can deliver this in customer environments, um, any thoughts around AI and context as we start to lead into a few slides to share with the team?
Yeah, I think again, when AI is done right, it's not on its own. It's not a gatekeeper. It's a guide. So I like to think of it as a guide. It can guide your patients, it can guide providers, it can guide your own employees. Um, and we need humans working alongside the best AI to make sure that it really isn't the gatekeeper and it is a guide. And this is going to allow, healthcare and the insurance industry to finally meet people where they are. And a lot of times where they are, it's a very stressful time. Somebody is sick, something, complex medical condition is happening. And so the less stress and the more that you can guide that person throughout their healthcare journey, the more that that patient is going to be satisfied, the more that your employees are going to be satisfied, and the better for everybody in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, every organization is so focused on NPS scores, and they can
Yes.
do a fantastic job when we get to that care team member. But it's interesting when you look at measurements and when you are the patient, and you're asked to, rate something 1 to 5, and it's always about that individual interaction, which is quite understandable, but we're often not asked about the overall process. So the person who handled me, might have been wonderful. I guess it's almost akin to um, if I have, an 8 a.m. appointment to see my primary care doc, and there's a huge amount of traffic in that area, you know, it yes, it could be frustrating for me to get there, but I'm not thinking about about the traffic associated
Mm,
with the organization. But it's
right,
almost akin in a way if I'm calling in or I'm trying to communicate or I'm trying to get information back. But I feel like I have to navigate all of this traffic in order to get there, or I have to navigate who I should reach, or maybe I'll press 6 to get someone in the care team instead of 1 for patient access because I know that might be a better way
right.
of getting
Kind
my
of
answer. I'm
gaming the
gaming the
system.
system a little
And I
bit.
think if you can create a singular conversational experience, we worked with a really large healthcare organization who has thousands and thousands of numbers and tons of different contact centers. And now when you call them, it's how can I help you today? Thank you for calling. You don't have to understand the complexity behind the scenes. Yeah, you're navigating the traffic, but all of a sudden, like everybody stopped at the stoplights and let you through, and now you're on to your appointment. So I think removing those barriers, right? Removing that complexity and not putting that on the patient and finding the right technology to do that and the right scenarios to start with it is super important.
Absolutely. So why don't I go ahead? I'm going to share a few
Yeah.
slides. Let me do one other thing, quick thing. Jump to start. Go. So to lead from the discussion with Sarah, um, first want to just level set for those of you who may not be as we may have some joining us today who aren't as familiar with Avaya. Our mission is to help the world's largest and most complex organizations, healthcare providers, payers, insurance providers, and government agencies form unbreakable customer connections and patient connections and connections with your care team. It's really about, apologies, really about enabling that linkage because this is not just throwing AI at scenarios and looking for patients to navigate self-service. It's really about doing that in tandem with your care team and the right providers and the right agents and the right services to really provide a much better experience, a true connection instead of just a contact. And then if we think we'll talk about why that matters. We'll get into how we can orchestrate the experience and leverage AI and look at how CX is changing. And the old model was very much a model around deflection. You've got limited resources, and it's hard to forecast when you're going to what volume of calls or interactions you're going to get across the duration of the day. Although we all know that Monday morning, first thing, is going to be quite busy. But the success was often measured, I hate to say it, but it's almost like by avoiding people, by forcing wait times, by putting people into self-service. Sarah talked about this earlier, that everything is organized around different clinical business units when the patient might not be sure which they fit into. And so they could end up going around in a few different circles to try to actually get to the right person to help assist them. And by the way, that's not just a challenge for the patient, but it's frustration for the care team and the agents. Because as you said, the patients then, as their frustration escalates, it then gets shared with the person that is then handling them. Um, it also, when you think about these inefficiencies, it means that we've had too many people that have had to touch them. So the process is not working optimally for the health system either, or the insurance provider either. And if we look at the modern CX reality, people expect AI to act and not just be a series of question and answer responses. So the shift really goes from, instead of deflecting people, being able to actually orchestrate a journey and orchestrate their workflow and do it in a way that can utilize a low code, no code scenario, because you don't want to spend 18 months trying to figure this out and and have all of your kind of ground rules keep changing. And then instead
Yeah,
of trying to do containment, oh, please go ahead, Sarah.
oh, I was just going to say, you don't have 18 months to spare because your patients are finding new healthcare providers in some cases because it's so hard to do business with you, even though they might love their doctor. I've done that before. I've switched over because it was so frustrating to get an appointment or to call in. And the technology is changing really quickly around this. So you're very quickly going to be left kind of on the outskirts if you don't sort of move forward now. We can't take those 18-month projects anymore.
Absolutely. And so instead of trying to contain people, we really want to be able to connect in the right way. And then don't think in terms of, scripts, right? Agent scripts, or the script that the patient has to, or member has to navigate through an IVR, but how we can hyper personalize that experience and utilize that intelligence to quickly figure out who is the right resource and give them very tangibly the items that they need to help provide an exceptional experience. So make a much faster, smarter, more connected interaction. And so if we think about that evolution of context, Sarah talked about this earlier. You call in and you're starting from scratch each time, unless you get like the secret number to call. I had a non-oncology infusion, and so I was able to, this care team member, Sarah, actually gave me her direct line and said, look, if we need to move this appointment, we do have flexibility. Just call me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got the magic number to get through that, instead of having to go in so many different circles and navigate through. But if we think about how we leverage context, the base level should be understanding the patient history and when they last interacted with the contact center. And they should know when my next appointment is. I shouldn't have to, repeat myself and repeat myself. And then if we think about the next step, it should be, you should already know what I've told you. You've got all of that data in your EHR systems, and or Salesforce and lots of other CRM components. So can't we leverage that information from my health profile to make smarter decisions? And then this idea of hyper personalization, Sarah and I were on a call earlier, and we were talking about how hyper personalization in one way can sound a little daunting. Oh my gosh, are we trying to look at so many different attributes for this individual? How would we handle that? But it's really looking at being able to analyze multiple components at the same time, and care for them as a person, not a problem. So it's really more of it's an opportunity for you that to be able to, you might, in effect, when Sarah's talked about kind of the low-hanging fruit, are you able to kind of pluck out the people who may need much more care and attention and get them to the right resources? Or we've been more effective with our routing and handling so that ultimately care team members end up with more time. They're not overstretched and pushed on average talk time, right? And kind of the basic metrics that can force people to get off too quickly without fully handling that interaction. Sarah, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I know that hyper personalization, just putting the word hyper in the front of it makes it a little scary, like you said, but we've been talking about personalization within the contact center industry for a decade plus. I have worked on a lot of these systems and designed them, both in the old space and the new space. And I think that this really just kind of takes it to the next level. A lot of companies are doing some sort of personalization. You come in, they do know when your appointment is, and they're like, "Oh, are you calling about this appointment?" But I think this is taking it, like you said, to the next level, but doesn't have to be scary. Predictive insights, for example, like what might this person do next? Or did they have a life event? Or is there some sort of indicator on their chart that they just had a cardiology appointment or a procedure and they're calling back in again? Those are all really good things to say. This isn't sort of a primary care patient that's just scheduling a visit because they have a sore throat. This is someone that has a more complex condition. And I think this is where you can really meet people. And those are the people that need the hyper personalization too, because they're the ones that, there's a lot of stress going on in their life. Let's not add more stress by making it hard to contact the company that they need to help them through this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we start to look um, at how we can support organizations, um, so this next slide talks about our Avaya Infinity platform to really create um, a single platform to support the patient journey and connecting to the care team. And so what we're able to do is we're applying intelligent orchestration, which gives us the ability to leverage AI and provide hyper personalization. It gives us the ability to integrate with your CRM applications, with Epic, with your EHR systems, um, with the tools and channels that you need for support, and do all of this in a single code base, so that we can make implementations easier, faster, more resilient, more flexible to your organization. And some of the key components is that this gives you the advantages of cloud and data sovereignty. So a virtual private instance, whether we're connecting in a hybrid mode and leveraging your on-prem existing environment and layering on new functionality through AI and orchestration and omni-channel, or we may be doing this fully on-prem. And I've got an upcoming slide that will talk about some of these scenarios in a little more depth. We can infuse omni-channel and conversations throughout the workflow. So let's say, for example, I've called in to patient access, but now I've got a few questions, or we've scheduled that appointment for me. It's with an expensive resource on the health system side, and we know that this is an area that can be tough around parking, around finding the right building. What if I can very easily and simply in the workflow push an SMS so they've got all of those details and they're not searching around to try to find that confirmation? Or we might be starting in a digital engagement, and we're going to add voice on top, or the ability to shift from chat to SMS. or utilize something like WhatsApp, right? For hospital providers, right? You've got patients who have many, many different languages. And we can also leverage things like language translation. And then if we look at hyper-personalizing the experience, think about the context of what they're doing right now. Where are we in their health profile? What appointments do they have upcoming? Are there things that we need to remind them about? And how can we help serve them better for a much more tailored experience? Sarah, any thoughts thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with all of this. I think the more that we can, like you said, infuse the omni-channel conversations with AI workflows, that moves things along faster within the organization. Maybe there's some work that can be done behind the scenes. I can switch between channels if I want, like you said, starting in one and ending in another. And I think honestly, that goes almost all to hyper personalize is now you've met me in my channel of choice. And if I request a switch, you've now, facilitated that switch. But you also know a bunch of information about me. So again, I don't have to repeat myself. I don't necessarily have to say what department I'm calling. Maybe I only see one department within your organization. Those are all, great things that help really make that entire experience very intelligent.
And then if we think about orchestration, and I'm going to get into a little more depth on how we do this, we're able to connect and orchestrate without having to have brittle, basic CRM and API integrations. It allows us to utilize a no-code and low-code workflow creation tool that can be rolled out incredibly quickly so that you can be really nimble around the processes that you're supporting and the ability to affect that really positive change without having to learn deep dive code. And then rapidly adapt with really flexible AI. So we've intentionally made this platform incredibly open. So we're not coming to the table to say, we have a set of AI tools that we're recommending, and this is part of our one package. It's the ability to bring in the tool sets that make the most sense, and they're continually evolving at such a tremendous pace, and also be really mindful about the cost of those interactions. So Sarah, you said earlier, IVR does not equal AI. And when we're also considering how we apply it, we want to make sure that we do it in a really mindful way. So we're not trying to throw all the technology at the wall. We're trying to say, for this type of interaction, what do we know about the patient? And are there things that would help us utilizing a large language model to make this more efficient? But let's use the model that's going to be most cost effective for us as well.
And then I also think there are some models out there that are better at like healthcare terminology or that kind of
Yes.
have a specialty, right? And it's constantly changing. That model could be maybe a Google Gemini today, and tomorrow I could wake up and see, oh, it looks like OpenAI is doing better at that now because they release some new model or tool. So that's the thing is that this stuff changes daily. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks, but this is not on the technology schedule of the past bits of technology. It is so much more on an accelerated timeline that it is really great to have the ability to be nimble as to what large language model you use behind the scenes.
But you would also completely lock that down. So you have your defined guardrails and scenarios. I've talked with healthcare providers who have said, it's like whack-a-mole, that so many different departments will say, hey, I have something else we want to use. And they almost forget about the sovereignty of that patient data. And they're considering using things that might not fit into that security model. We can make sure that those scenarios and routines are very well defined. It might even be that as we're going through that scenario for patient access, are there particular subroutines that are kind of blessed and reviewed, right? We're making sure that we're handling the right information, we're giving the right external answers back to those patients, and probably a very different set of answers would go back to physicians who are calling into healthcare insurance than they would provide to the members. So we can be very very prescriptive and very intuitive with those interactions. And then if we look at in a little bit more depth, this also we don't have a planned section just on AI analytics, but there's a wealth of analytics that are provided as part of this platform. And for those of you who might be Aura and Elite customers, we've also intentionally written that schema to be very friendly with CMS data, with CMS call management system data. Because we have many customers that are layering Infinity in a hybrid mode with their patient access Elite environments. So we need to make sure that reporting structure and analytics all flows extremely well. And then we can also utilize AI tools to query those analytics. And we're supporting that data lakehouse architecture along with our alliance with Databricks. We've got tremendous new digital and AI packages. CRM integrations can go from Epic, Cerner, et cetera, on down through homegrown CRM and our headless clients with Salesforce, ServiceNow, Microsoft Dynamics, and others, and can even go into the mode of our BPO and business partner models around subtenanting, which so that customers who may not need their own virtual private instance tenant might be looking to Waterfield to provide that service with Infinity. But all a single platform in terms of the components, the features, and the strength of the solution. I said earlier, I talked a little bit high level on the deployment scenarios. So that same software, that same SaaS model, that same software as a service can be deployed in a pure cloud model, where that's in a virtual private instance, not multi-tenant, that we manage. Today that runs on Azure, but you're also going to see us rolling out hypervisor of choice around Google integration, AWS, et cetera. The next is in a hybrid mode. So I mentioned earlier, we can overlay and extend Aura CC Elite on-prem that you could still manage and maintain, and then add Infinity services from the cloud. And that can include AI self-service on into AI transcription and other features and function. We're also launching our ability to provide Infinity on-prem, meaning Azure local. So you're supported within your data center with the same kind of SaaS model, but native to your environment. And so a tagline is that there's no complexity, but just flexibility for you as customers. This talks a little bit about the pace of AI innovation, but I'm looking and realizing that we've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to kind of jump ahead. And when we've discussed different AI tools, a key area that we're leveraging is something called MCP, Model Context Protocol. So think about it as the connector that lets AI talk to AI agents and your tools. And if you do a comparison, think of, before MCP, it can be like duct tape. Think of all the different kinds of API and CRM integrations that you have to handle in one-offs. As opposed to after MCP, it's really more of a plug and play scenario. Before MCP, you're thinking out every possible scenario for that patient or that member or that doctor. Now instead, we can be much more fluid with that workflow to capture those different scenarios. And a technical slide. We don't need to spend a lot of time here, but this can be a kind of a leave behind for those who are technical in the audience. We're leveraging this AI agentic stack, both ahead of connecting to a human and when we connect to an agent or a care team member. So let's leverage what we know about them. What are their intrinsics? Sarah talked earlier about capturing their authentication. And so I might do that through a voice biometric, or I might do that through a facial recognition from my mobile device. And now you know that it's really Carolyn who's on the line. So there's far fewer questions you have to ask me to figure out, how to navigate. And you might realize I've got an appointment at, 5 o'clock this afternoon. Is that why I'm calling? Because I'm running late, or is it something else? And when I get an agent, think about everything that you can give them in terms of tools at the desktop, so that someone new comes into the organization. There's a lot of effort that you put into in training and process. Well, what if we can help make them an expert faster? It also helps enormously around retention, because if you're frustrating that person, they could say, all right, I'm just having too much trouble dealing with all of the systems on the side, or it's just creating, too much stress on each of those calls. We want to make that easier for them as they navigate. And to look at an example. So John is calling in to scheduling. And we could start with an authentication scenario, and we could utilize biometrics or my mobile facial rec. And now we know that it's John. We've authenticated him. We can give him a reminder about anything that's past due in terms of payment. We will check all of the detail around, that account and his profile. So we'll also mask sensitive data when we deliver that call or that work item to an agent. So does the agent truly need to know all of these details about John? Not necessarily, right? Do they need to know their credit card number? No. Do they need, last 4 digits? Fine. And also then flag about any areas that might be of a concern. So for example, cardiology referral. Well, let's say John was discharged a month ago from the cardiac care unit. And now John's calling in because he's not feeling very well. Feels like he's got a virus. And so when he's talking with that patient access individual, what if we alert them that he was recently discharged and proactively give them someone in CCU as an expert because they might want to join that discussion because it might not be waiting a week to get in to see their primary care. We really want them back into the CCU because do they actually have a virus around their heart tissue? And now they've got a liter of fluid, and the last thing we want is to have them readmitted to the hospital. And then if we think about resource coordination, negotiation, execution, we can be much more fluid around that whole interaction. And try to be careful on timing. We've got a few examples for you that actually show what this looks like in practice. So this is one of our Infinity agents. We've got integration right here with Epic. I'm handling a call from Anna. I have the ability to launch workflows depending on how our conversation is transitioning. We're capturing all of the utterances and the sentiment and the full transcription for the interaction. Um, we can handle all different channels or shift channels in those interactions. Jay actually did this particular demo. Jay also had an agent who was the operator, utilizing the same kind of WebRTC thin client, in effect, console. And AI Assist is giving me my recommendations. Think of it as kind of AI sitting on my shoulder to help me through those interactions. So really, we're providing an ability to do tandem care. Think in terms of AI combined with your care team members, your agents, the humans who support your patients, your members, and your organization. I know that Jay has been handling, lots of questions in the background. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. I don't know, Jay, if there's anything that you want to tee up for us right now. And sorry, we went a little bit longer than originally planned.
Yeah, no, we do have lots of questions. I have a few more. We'll get those out to everybody. So, Meredith, I have a question. Will we leave the bridge open a little bit for questions or have an email that we can send them in if the bridge closes? But lots of good questions. We'll send them out in a summary. Thank you all very much. So.
Yeah, we really hope that this was helpful. We hope that that it gave you some good food for thought. We're really we're really excited to work with all of you. So part of that offer is to also do some follow up with the Avaya and Waterfield teams. And I know Meredith has some things that she'll be sending out. Any other, Sarah, any thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think just ending and remembering, and I like that we're on this slide, is that, AI and humans together. AI is a guide. Let it be a guide, but both are needed to deliver the best value to patients.
And we don't know if we're going to be cut off in 1 minute or if
Oh, I
if
think Meredith said she's going to leave it open for a little
oh,
bit.
she is. Okay. So
Great.
Jay, are there any is there anything you want to call out from the Q&A?
Um, there is. I mean, I think the biggest common question was about HIPAA compliance and PCI, and we've answered that in chat, and we'll send that out. Yes, we officially are going down that path. We've got auditors, and we should have that certification very soon. Um, we do also integrate.
We can give an LOE
Yeah.
letter now today, and we have that formal certification coming very shortly.
Yep. And then for the other thing is obviously Epic integration and then also Cerner, right? So having that integration, the screenshots we show are the real value of, giving your caregivers the ability to have a single pane of glass to really, to speed up care, reduce the amount of, well, let me authenticate you again and again and again, right? You should know me. And then I think the biggest thing also is the fact that I know your journey, right? I know that you came in on chat or voice, and I know how many times, and I can see whether or not I have first call resolution or not based on, your trends, right? Are you calling me 5 times about the same thing? Well, obviously, I'm probably not doing the best job. So, um, but yeah, those are some of the more common questions we had.
Great. And then hopefully, um, what might have also been evident is when we talk about MCP, about model context protocol, and just about the overall capabilities within the platform, it gives us a much higher level of capability in terms of integration, right? Versus more siloed scenarios that you might think of in the past. Any other thoughts, Jay and Sarah?
No, I think this is
Not for
just the
me.
beginning of where what's all headed. So, Sarah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. No more thoughts for me either.
And maybe one more item would be when we work with customers like yourselves, we can also workshop and model out scenarios that you think will really resonate with your line of business health team members, so that when we're going into demonstrations and scenarios, um, we're talking about things that will have an impact and address key challenges and pain points.